I really don't think, quite frankly, that President Biden thinks that much about Imran Khan at all, and especially with him not in power anymore.
Do you think President Biden is directly referring to the security of Pakistan's nuclear arsenal, or whether he is commenting on the lack of cohesion within Pakistani society?
Of course, I don't have a clear answer. I think this is what many of us are trying to think about, and there's a lot to unpack here. I think that on the one hand, we need to separate between his comment that Pakistan may be one of the most dangerous countries in the world and his comment about nuclear weapons. We've continued to hear, up until very recently, statements from members of the U.S. Political elite about Pakistan being one of the most dangerous countries in the world. That's not new. I think it's his comment about the nuclear weapons that's more surprising, just because we don't hear.
We've seen Pakistan's Prime Minister travel to the US. We've seen Pakistan's Foreign Minister. We've seen Pakistan's Army Chief also make a rare visit to the US very recently. Why do you speculate such comments have come at this time where perhaps there was a feel-good factor between Pakistan and US, at least here in Pakistan?
Keep in mind as well that the context of where he made the speech. I mean, he was in California, he was speaking at a fundraiser event. This was not a policy address. Now, I understand that this is the US president, so everything he says in any context will always be scrutinized, and for good reason. I think at the end of the day, it's not going to impact the relationship in a big way, and I think the timing is coincidental. I do not think, contrary to some conspiracy theories that I've seen on social media, that Biden doesn't like the fact that there's been more momentum and he wants to undermine that. I don't think that's it at all.
So as an American, what do you think the Pakistani people should know about America and Americans, and what should Americans know about Pakistanis?
I also think, quite frankly, that there's unfortunately a tendency in some quarters to wrongly depict religious issues in Pakistan, sort of suggesting that every woman is veiled in Pakistan, things like that. I mean, we know that's obviously not true, but I think that for many Americans that may depend too much on the mass media, that's why I think that these exchanges, these people-to-people exchanges between Americans and Pakistanis are so important.
My name is Hamza, Salam, and you're watching the Pakistan Daily. Today we're going to speak to Michael Kugelman, the South Asia Institute Director at the Wilson Center. So Michael, thank you very much for speaking to us today, first of all.
Great. I'm happy to be here with you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. So, Michael, President Biden's comments about Pakistan's nuclear arsenal at a recent congressional campaign reception have caused a huge storm in Pakistan. As you referred to Pakistan as maybe one of the most dangerous countries in the world, and also said that Pakistan nuclear weapons without any cohesion. So, Michael, I wanted to ask you, do you think President Biden is directly referring to the security of Pakistan's nuclear arsenal, or whether he is commenting on the lack of cohesion within Pakistani society, which may make Pakistan's nukes more dangerous?
Yeah, and of course, I don't have a clear answer. I think this is what many of us are trying to think about, and there's a lot to unpack here. I think that on the one hand, we need to separate between his comment that Pakistan may be one of the most dangerous countries in the world and his comment about nuclear weapons. We've continued to hear, up until very recently, statements from members of the U.S. Political elite about Pakistan being one of the most dangerous countries in the world. That's not new. I think it's his comment about the nuclear weapons that's more surprising, just because we don't hear senior U.S. officials make those types of comments publicly anymore. And I think that my understanding is that U.S. officials have actually been less concerned about nuclear safety and security issues in Pakistan in recent years. So that's what the big surprise is. And indeed, what exactly he meant is what we're still trying to figure out. My own sense, and just sort of thinking this through initially, is that President Biden gets his daily intelligence briefs. He gets information about what's going on in Pakistan, and I imagine that he's been told about how there's a lot of churn and volatility at the moment in Pakistan because of the political polarization, the serious economic crisis, and perhaps he sort of considered that against the context of what I would describe as legacy concerns in Washington about nuclear weapons. That there have been concerns about nuclear issues in Pakistan for quite some time. So perhaps he was sort of thinking about what he'd heard about all of the political strife, the political churn, and all of that, and that he made a judgment. So I don't necessarily think he was referring to cohesion in the context of command and control of Pakistan's nuclear weapons, and more in terms of Pakistan on the whole. But again, this is just speculation at this point.
No, it makes sense. But Michael, let's consider the timing. We've seen Pakistan's Prime Minister travel to the US, have a photograph with President Biden. We've seen Pakistan's Foreign Minister travel to the US. We've seen Pakistan's Army Chief also make a rare visit to the US very recently. And in Pakistan, there was an atmosphere of better relations with the US, or maybe a recalibration of relations. So why do you think, or why do you speculate such comments have come at this time where perhaps there was a feel-good factor between Pakistan and US, at least here in Pakistan?
So I think that we shouldn't place too much. We shouldn't overthink the timing issue. I think that first of all, I don't think that his comments are going to inflict significant damage on the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. I don't think they'll hurt it, just because for the most part, the U.S.-Pakistan relationship is being driven by the State Department here in D.C., not by the White House. I mean, we're seeing major momentum in relations, as you've noted, but a lot of that comes from diplomatic engagements with the State Department, and there have been officials from other agencies that have engaged with Pakistan, but mainly from the State Department. So I don't think this one comment from Biden is going to cause much damage. And I was actually struck that your foreign minister's comments today seemed fairly conciliatory. I mean, he was essentially saying, well, this is why we need to have more engagement. He wasn't suggesting that we should move back from the relationship. But in terms of the timing, again, it could be that Biden happened to have received one of his daily intelligence briefs that was particularly striking to him, and he had it in the back of his mind, and that prompted him to refer to Pakistan in this speech at this fundraiser. And keep in mind as well the context of where he made the speech. I mean, he was in California. He was speaking at a fundraiser event. This was not a policy address. Now, I understand that this is the U.S. president, so everything he says in any context will always be scrutinized, and for good reason. But I think this was an aside. It was sort of like a throwaway point in the sense that he was just trying to back up another point by referring to Pakistan. And for all those reasons, while I understand how it's been received with so much concern in Pakistan, I think at the end of the day, it's not going to impact the relationship in a big way. And I think the timing is coincidental. I do not think, contrary to some conspiracy theories that I've seen on social media, that Biden doesn't like the fact that there's been more momentum and he wants to undermine that. I don't think that's it at all. I think it was just an off-the-cuff remark that he made based on something he may have heard or read in an intelligence brief or something like that, and he made the comment in an offhand way.
Mhm. But Michael, some people in Pakistan believe that since ex-Prime Minister Imran Khan has been accusing the US of conspiring to remove him from power earlier this year, and Imran Khan has not only targeted the US but also the Biden administration, and also Imran Khan has targeted Pakistan's military establishment, which is ultimately responsible for the safety of Pakistan's nuclear assets. So, do you think Imran Khan's statements may have influenced President Biden to make the statement and to, in effect, cause some domestic political instability in Pakistan?
No, not at all. I don't think that anything happening in Pakistan would have impacted or influenced Biden's decision to make these comments. I gave my initial observation of why he may have made these comments and when and why he did at this moment. So no, I really don't think, quite frankly, that President Biden thinks that much about Imran Khan at all, and especially with him not in power anymore. So, and I will acknowledge it does seem that this statement by Biden has given ammunition to Imran Khan and his supporters to sort of turn the attention on the current government in Pakistan. Say, why would you want to engage with? Why would you want to strengthen engagement with an administration that has a president saying things like this? But no, I don't think that anything Khan did or said had any type of bearing on Biden's comments.
Mm. But Michael, we've seen that Pakistan and the US have had a deep strategic relationship earlier. Then the relationship has not gone so good, and now we're trying to rebuild that relationship. But what do you think it will take now in 2022 for Pakistan and the United States of America to build a strategic relationship which is based on mutual trust, respect, and even mutual benefit?
Well, I mean, it's always been difficult, right? I mean, as you know, this is a relationship that has a checkered past. It's had its good times, it had its bad times. It's been a roller coaster, a bad marriage. Choose your cliche, choose your metaphor. And I think that setting aside Biden's comment, it was always going to be a challenge to make this relationship work at this moment for various reasons. One being geopolitical constraints, that both countries have good ties with the other's major rival, and you know, given that the U.S. competition with China is the core U.S. foreign policy issue, there's only so much that could be done in terms of expanding a relationship with Pakistan, given that Pakistan is closely allied with China. But I do think there'd been momentum in recent months for several reasons. One, that we finally have a formal ambassador in Pakistan after a gap of several years. That helps coordinate diplomacy and policy. Certainly, the new government in Pakistan has I think offered healthier space for U.S. officials to explore the potential for greater cooperation. I'd also argue that one of the big traditional tension points in U.S.-Pakistan relations has been not removed but reduced from the picture. That being terrorism. I think that the U.S. is not as concerned about terrorism in Pakistan as it had been in the past. So that's provided opportunities, and I think that those are still at play. But you know, you look at how things are, and you look at the geopolitical constraints that I mentioned, the China factor, and also the bandwidth factor. That Pakistan, I would be very candid in saying, is not a top 10 relationship as the U.S. sees it at this point. It may not even be a top 20 relationship. With so much focus on the war in Ukraine and competition with China, and you know, rebalancing to Asia and the Indo-Pacific policy, which I don't think considers Pakistan to be a part of it, that is going to make it difficult to really expand the relationship. And I think the best hope for the relationship, quite frankly, is to have one that is focused on more on non-security issues. And I think that seems to be I think that you're starting to hear U.S. officials express support for that type of a shift, because it's typically been dominated by security considerations. And of course, Biden's comment is going to bring attention back to that. But I think that the best hope for this relationship is to sort of erect a firewall between security considerations, which tend to cause tensions, and non-security cooperation, where there's actually been a lot of quiet success stories in the recent past. And there's a lot to cooperate over: humanitarian assistance in the immediate term, health issues, education. You know, there's something to be told there. So I think there's no reason why that can't still happen. But certainly, I think just in terms of public reactions and public perceptions in Pakistan, Biden's comment certainly is not going to help generate more support from the public in Pakistan for a better relationship with the U.S.
No, yes, yes, you're absolutely right. But you mentioned non-security relationships. So, Michael, you're an American and you have deep relations in Pakistan. You've traveled here significantly, and you've been following the developments in Pakistan. So, as an American, what do you think the Pakistani people should know about America and Americans, and what should Americans know about Pakistanis, which can help us, build bridges and people-to-people connections, so that we can improve the relationship between our two respective countries?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that taking the second part of your question first, what should Americans know about Pakistan? I think that there has tended to be reductive, oversimplified portrayals of Pakistan in the major media in the U.S. and the West more broadly, which I think has tended to project an incomplete picture of Pakistan, one that tends to accentuate the worst or the more negative aspects of Pakistan and sort of overplaying them. And I think that there are many in the U.S. that think that terrorism poses a greater risk in Pakistan than it really does, even though certainly one should acknowledge that the Pakistani Taliban has resurged. But you're not looking at how things were some years back. And I also think, quite frankly, that there's unfortunately a tendency in some quarters to wrongly depict religious issues in Pakistan, sort of suggesting that every woman is veiled in Pakistan, things like that. I mean, we know that's obviously not true, but I think that for many Americans that may depend too much on the mass media for that information, it's not good. That's why I think that these exchanges, these people-to-people exchanges between Americans and Pakistanis are so important. Many more Pakistanis come to the U.S. than Americans go to Pakistan. You've had the Fulbright scholarship for many years, where you've had many Pakistanis come to the U.S. to study, but a big part of that is public diplomacy. So I think that it's important when Pakistanis come to the U.S. to study or visit, engaging with American counterparts is important, and just, say going to a local library or a community center or a school and talking about their countries in a very basic way, that can be very helpful. In terms of what Pakistanis should know about the U.S., I would argue it's sort of hard to get to that, but I think that Pakistanis should recognize that the U.S. has reasonable, justifiable concerns about Pakistan because of its policies of the past. That, if I can say, I will say this very candidly, a strong perception here that Pakistan has tended to act in ways that directly go against U.S. interests and threaten American lives, including how Pakistani policies played out during the war in Afghanistan, where they provided backing for the groups targeting the U.S. in Afghanistan, and so on and so forth. So I think that it's difficult because there's so much mistrust and disconnects in this relationship. But again, that's why the people-to-people relations are so important. I wish we could have more of that. I wish more Americans could visit Pakistan, and I wish that there could be more cases of Pakistanis in the U.S. doing more to strengthen people-to-people ties with the country. That may not have been the type of answer you were looking for, but I think I look at this on a very basic level. The people-to-people ties are the key, and I hope that we'll see more of that.
No, yes, Michael, you're absolutely right. And I agree that people to people ties are the emblem of diplomacy. So let's hope that Pakistan and the US can invest in that regard too.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's hope. And again, I mean, it's been a quiet success story, that type of thing. And, I think many of a certain age wouldn't know, for example, that there was a day back in the day, decades ago, when Hollywood would come to Pakistan to shoot movies. There was at least one movie that was filmed in Lahore. I'm forgetting the name of it now, but obviously it was a different time. During the early period of the Cold War, the U.S.-Pakistan relationship was very strong, which made it easier and provided the space for those types of cultural people-to-people engagements. But there is a story there, and it's not really understood, especially with the younger generations in both countries.
Yes, yes, you're absolutely right, Michael. And we thank you so much for your time today, and we hope to speak to you again soon.
Absolutely. Be happy to come back, and thanks for having me.
YouTube पर Googly न्यूज देखने के लिए youtube.com की सर्च बार में Googly न्यूज टीवी टाइप करें। Googly न्यूज के पेज पर सुर्ख रंग के सब्सक्रिप्शन वाले बटन पर क्लिक करना ना भूलिए। YouTube पेज पर अपलोड होने वाली वीडियोस से बाखबर रहने के लिए बेल आइकन पर क्लिक कीजिए। आपको हर नई वीडियो के बारे में नोटिफिकेशन मौसूल हो जाएगा।